Good morning, everyone. This is the report of Group 4. Our topic for today is about virtue ethics. So, what is virtue ethics? It is the ethical framework that is concerned with understanding the good as a matter of developing the virtuous character of a person. So, it is the act of a person in a good way. It also focuses on the formation of one's character brought about by determining and doing virtuous acts. So when we say virtue ethics, it is a continuous doing of actions by an individual in a good way. There are two major thinkers of ancient Greece that had discourse concerning virtue. First, Plato, and the second one is Aristotle. Plato. For Plato, the real is outside the realm of any human sensory experience but can somehow be grasped by one's intellect. So, for Plato, in order for the human to analyze if the action is virtuous or not, one must have an intellect or understanding about it. And then the truth and ultimately the good are in the sphere of forms of ideas transcending daily human condition. Second one, Aristotle. For Aristotle, the real is found within our everyday encounter with objects in the world. What makes nature intangible is its character of having both form and matter. For another explanation, Aristotle's discourse of ethics departs from Platonic understanding of reality and conception of the good. Both Plato and Aristotle affirm rationality as the highest faculty of a person, and having such characteristics enable a person to realize the very purpose of his or her existence. So therefore, Plato and Aristotle both believe that a good or doing a good act is understanding of one's self. So we need intellect in order for us to realize that what we are actually doing is either good or bad. But at the end, they differ in their appreciation of reality and nature, which in turn results their constructing stand on what the ethical principle should be. So, the deep and thorough explanation will be done by the next report. Thank you.
Happiness and ultimate purpose. So we will try to understand the idea of Aristotle, which he says that purpose of our life is to become happy. So when you talk about happiness and ultimate purpose, there is one question in our mind. Why did God created us? The answer for that question is this. God created us because we have our own purpose. He created all things in the world with purpose and functions. The ultimate purpose in life is to become happy. So therefore, we don't need to do something that will make us bad, but rather, we do something that we think is beneficial for all of us. So in order for us to attain that kind of happiness, para ma-reach natin ang ultimate purpose natin nga maging masadya, we need to do good. Not for ourselves, but for the benefit of others also. Aristotle begins his discussion of ethics by showing that every act that a person does is directed toward a particular purpose, aim, or what the Greeks called telos. There is a purpose why one does something, and for Aristotle, a person manifests a good that he or she aspires for. So, as I have said, God created us with functions or purposes. So why man kita ginbuhat out of something just because of doing it? But we are doing something because we have our own goal, we have our higher goal. So that is the idea of Aristotle when we talk about our aim or high goal in life. So in order for us to attain that ultimate purpose in life, we should do good things. Next, for Aristotle, the good is considered to be the telos or purpose for which all acts seek to achieve. Aristotle is aware that one does an act not only to achieve a particular purpose but also believes such purpose can be utilized for a higher goal or activity, which then can be used to achieve an even higher purpose and so on. So, there are two general criteria in knowing the highest good of man. The first one is the final end. For example, ihambal mo sa self mo nga, kung mabuhat ko dya, ang bagay nga dya, okay dun ko. Why na kita gina-after nga mga malain or why ka na iban gusto basta mo dyan lang akan nabuhat. Contented ka na once ma-achieve mo dun ang bagay nga da, naging buhat mo, kag feel mo, na-attain mo dun ang ultimate purpose mo which is happiness. That is our final end already. Pero if sige pa kita pangita higher goal, higher purpose, therefore, this is not yet your end goal. So for example, nag-eskwela ka talad, hindi man ibig sabihin nga nag-eskwela ka lang. But nag-eskwela ikaw because you are finding your higher goal. So therefore, ang pag-eskwela, this is not your final end. That is the idea of Aristotle. And the second criteria is doing a highest good of man, that you are doing a highest purpose of life. Try to ask yourself, it is self-sufficient? Are you satisfied what you are doing? So nakahatag bala siya self-satisfaction? Are you fulfilled if nabuhat mo na, kaguay ka na, nag-crave for something more? Therefore, naobra nyo dun ang the highest good of man. Aristotle's perspective. So satisfaction in life is arrived at once this highest good is attained. Nothing else is sought after and desired once the self-sufficient goal is achieved, since this is already considered as the best possible good in life. How can we know that we are dealing with our final end or self-sufficient? We as human beings, we are longing and longing for something more. Like, if in case nga hindi ikaw satisfied sa ginaobrahan mo or kulang ang sweldo, mangita gid ikaw ko obra. Tapos kung hindi ka man makasaho, mangita ka man iban. Because if we kept on craving or chasing for more work, you can never be satisfied. Hindi mo ma-feel ang tawag ng contentment. Kaya hindi mo ma-attain ang tawag ng happiness kay do may ginasagap kapag gid nga iban. So, therefore, hindi ta pagid maabot ang tawag nga happiness. Though hindi ta mapangita ang happiness kag hindi ta mapangita ang tuod nga happiness kag ang ultimate purpose natin sa kabuhi. But according to Aristotle, older individuals would agree that the highest purpose and the ultimate good of man is happiness, or for the Greeks, eudaimonia. So in this, Aristotle suggested that the older individuals has a wide perspective and wisdom in finding happiness and ultimate purpose in life. So they agree that the purpose of life is finding happiness because they experience a lot and they have already the knowledge about what is really meant of true happiness or what is the ultimate purpose of happiness in our life. So they believe hindi enough nga may kwarta ka lang or manggaranon ka, but the main goal of life or the main goal in life is to become happy. Happiness for Aristotle is the only self-sufficient aim that one can aspire for. No amount of wealth or power can be more fulfilling than having achieved the condition of happiness. One can imagine a life being wealthy, powerful, and experiencing pleasurable feelings, and yet, such life is still not satisfying without happiness. Happiness is the final end, and happiness is the only thing that can satisfy human being So for others, they attach it to their wealth and power, or for some, happiness is something pleasurable. But we never know the exact definition of happiness. The only thing na dapat tubuhatan is to find our own happiness by doing our best. If you are good at something and you feel satisfied about it, do better. That is where you can find happiness. So for example, business-minded ikaw, nalipay ikaw magnegosyo. So, ano himuon mo? So, himuon mo ang imo nga best para ma-attain mo day ang happiness nga gusto mo. Another one, kung nalipay ikaw magtudlo, then do something to become a better teacher. Because there's a place for us where we can find our own happiness. Pareho kita nga tawo, but we differ based on the way we perform our actions or how we functions properly. So, hindi na kita na magpadalom about the meaning of happiness because it is within us. It is within you. Kita mismo dapat balaan natin kung ano ang dapat natin obrahan to attain the specific ultimate purpose sa ating kabuhi, which is to become happy. Dapat kita mismo kadaa ang maka-feel ka deeper sense of being happy.
My report is all about virtue as excellence. Achieving the highest purpose of a human person concerns the ability to function according to reason and to perform an activity well or excellently. This excellent way of doing things is called virtue, or arete by the Greeks. Aristotle says that excellence is an activity of human soul, and therefore, one needs to understand the very structure of a person's soul, which must be directed by his or her rational activity in an excellent way. So, when we say virtue as excellence, there should be a reason and the ability to perform it. Virtue is something that one strives for in time. So, one does not become an excellent person overnight. So, dapat we need to work for it to become an excellent person. Being an excellent individual works in doing well in her day-to-day existence. For example, one who pursues the good for selfish reasons fail to exemplify excellence in being for the good, even if that selfishness leads to good result. So, biskan may good result ang imo nga pagka-selfish, it's not about or it's not what we called excellence, because you fail to exemplify the excellence in being good. Since one can be for the good for the wrong reasons, virtue requires excellence in being for the good. That's why, based on our example, we can't be an excellent person if we are doing selfish acts but also lead to good result, but it does not count. For Aristotle's perspective, the human soul is divided into two parts, the irrational element and the rational faculty. Whether these are physically separate or are separate only abstractly, it is still irrelevant to our present purpose. So when we say irrational element of the soul, it has two parts or two components. The first is vegetative in nature and common to all living things. Thus, it is not relevant to a discussion of human virtue. The other source is from the appetites and desiring spring, or what we call appetitive element. This part, though irrational, bears a special relation to the rational faculties, and that it can be made submissive to the reason and obedient to its dictates. Furthermore, the vegetative side is concerned with basic needs that keep us alive and is effectively in our survival instincts. So those basic needs are home, shelter, food, like that. So when we say appetitive element or the appetitive side, it helps us to distinguish between needs and wants. So when we say needs, it is our kinahanglan gid natin. It is very important for us and hindi kita mabuhi kung without our needs. But when we say wants, it is like something our only desire. So whether we can achieve it or not, it's okay. Kumbaga, kung tilad, dapat ipairala natin is ang needs lang danay natin. It's because to be a practical person, kinahanglan natin i-fulfill ang atin nga needs. But once, kumbaga pwede natin siya danay ma-set aside and then we can go back to it after mag-okay dun ang ating situation or kung makaluwag-luwag dun kita. On the other hand, the rational faculty exercises excellence. So there are still two parts, the moral and intellectual. When we say moral, it concerns the act of doing. When we say intellectual, it concerns the act of knowing. So when we have a rational faculty, it means we know or we are aware of what we are doing. One rational aspect where a person can attain excellence is in the intellectual faculty of the soul. As stated by Aristotle, this excellence is attained through teaching. So, ginatudlo ni siya. Excellence is attained through teaching. Through time, one learns from the vast experiences in life where he or she gains knowledge on these things. One learns and gains wisdom by being taught or by learning. So, it is true that according to Aristotle, virtue is something that one strives in time. Waay ti tawo nga nagturog lang pagbugtaw na excellent na siya. It's because it should be taught or it should be learned by time. Ways by which one can attain intellectual excellence. First, the philosophic, and the second is practical. When we say philosophic wisdom, it deals with attaining knowledge about the fundamental principles and truths that governs the universe. Example, general theory on the origins of the things. It helps one understand, in general, the meaning of life. Practical wisdom is an excellence in knowing the right conduct in carrying out particular act. In other words, one can attain a wisdom that can provide us with a guide on how to behave in our daily lives. Philosophic wisdom relates to intelligence, prudence, common sense, knowledge, and philosophy. So, someone who is reasonable or to exercise moderations in desires is what we call a philosophic person. Practical wisdom is to make good choices. Not only must our reasoning to be correct, but we must also have the right desires. It is a true and reasoned state or capacity to act with regard to the things that are good or bad for man. It is not merely a theoretical knowledge of what is good or bad, but also the capacity to act on such knowledge. So it does not only mean that we know how to act or we know what is good or bad, but we also need to distinguish it based on our acts. So Aristotle considered practical wisdom as the highest intellectual virtue. Although the condition of being excellent can be attained by a person through the intellectual aspect of soul, the situation does not make her into a morally good individual. However, Aristotle suggests that although the rational functions of a person, the moral and the intellectual, are distinct from each other, it is necessary for humans to attain the intellectual virtue of practical wisdom in order to accomplish a morally virtuous act. So it is not only enough that we are an intellectual person, but we also need to have a moral in order for us to become a virtuous person. Aristotle is careful in making a sharp distinction between moral and intellectual virtue. In itself, having practical wisdom or the excellence in knowing what to act upon thus makes someone already virtuous, morally virtuous. Knowing the good is different from determining and acting what is good. So, this point, knowing the good is different from determining and acting what is good. Syempre, we should not only know what is good or bad, but we also need to do it. We need to act. But a morally good person has to achieve the intellectual virtue of practical wisdom to perform the task of being moral. So in short, moral and intellectual virtue coincide with each other. So we can't be a morally good person if we only have an intellectual virtue, but we also need to have a practical wisdom.
So our last topic for today is about moral virtue and misoids. When we talk about moral virtue, according to Aristotle, it is a disposition to behave in the right manner and is a mean between extremes of deficiency and excess, which are vices. So we learn this through habit and practice rather than through reasoning and instruction. Examples of moral virtues are honesty, courage, compassion, self-control, fairness, etc. While on the other hand, misoids is a mean in the middle between too much and too little. According to Aristotle, this doesn't mean mediocrity, but a balance between the vices of the extremes. Based on Aristotle, a morally virtuous person is concerned with achieving her appropriate action in manner that is neither excessive nor deficient. Dapat average lang, according to him. So one has to function in a state that her personality manifests the right amount of feelings, passions, and ability for a particular act. Furthermore, a morally virtuous person targets the mesoids, meaning magiging virtuous person ka kung sa middle ka lang. Dapat hindi ka magkulang, hindi ka man dapat mag-sobra. Just like sa term nga courage, nga kung less ang ating courage, ang fear naman ang atong mabatsyag, kung too much man ating courage, nagiging reckless kita. For Aristotle, the task of targeting the mean is always difficult because every situation is different from one another. Thus, the mesoids is constantly moving depending on the circumstance he or she is in. So next, from Aristotle's perspective, it ultimately leads to defining what exactly moral virtue is. According to him, moral virtue is a state of character that concerned with choice, lying in a mean that is the mean relative to us, this being determined by a rational principle, and by that principle by which the man of practical wisdom would determine it. So moral virtue is firstly the condition arrived by a person who has a character identified out of her habitual exercise of particular actions. According to him, one's character is seen as a growth in terms of the continuous preference for the good. According to him, kuno, the virtuous person not only knows what the good thing to do is, but she or he is also emotionally attached to it. So being virtuous, meaning he or she knows how to exhibit the excellence of reason and of course the character to it. Furthermore, Aristotle clarifies that not all feelings, passions, and actions have a middle point. When a mean is sought, it is in the context of being able to identify the good act in a given situation. However, when what is involved is seen as bad feeling, passion, or action, the middle is non-existence because there is no good or mesoids in something that is already considered a bad act. For example, when one murders someone, there is no intermediary for Aristotle in the act because there is no proper way that such act can be committed. So in this situation, it could not be considered as a moral act because murdering someone is a crime and the middle of it is non-existence because there is no good in murdering someone. Thus, it was stated here that there is no intermediary for Aristotle in the act.
For the continuation of our report in Virtue Ethics, Aristotle provides examples of particular virtues and corresponding the excesses and deficiencies. We have a table here composed of excess, middle, and deficiency. So when we say excess in Aristotle writes, it means irascibility or irascible, which means having or showing a tendency to be easily angered. So in excess, we have here impulsiveness, recklessness, and prodigality. These are the behavior of a person that are irascible and, for example, for being impulsive person, waay magiging na paminsar kung ano yagwaan na in the future. Nagpatuga-tuga ka nga mamana. Tapos mag-away ka mo ka imo nga bana or asawa, nagsumbatanay ka mo dyan ka mga malain nga tinaga. Next one is the recklessness. So, reckless driving is one of the example here. And in prodigality naman is abuso sa tanan nga bagay, time, energy, money, and even patience of someone. So those are the example in excess. So let's move here in the middle or mean. We have here the self-control, courage, and liberality. In middle, it is mean for good temper. According to Aristotle, if we live by these means and strive to never be irascible, the world will never change. So here, yes, kung may self-control, courage, and liberality kita within, why not? People seems to be very disciplined in this case. May mga initiative kumbaga. So, waay itrason para magkinagamo. Kumbaga, less talk, less mistakes. May control. Ikaw mismo ga-decide para sa kaugalingan mo. And the last one here is deficiency. Deficiency here in Aristotle's right is in irascibility, which means too little anger with good temper. We have here the word indecisiveness, cowardice, and meanness. For example, without making the small issues bigger than your pride. In this case, it is very understandable what Aristotle means about this deficiency in virtue ethics. Sometimes being coward saves you from evil temptation. In this regard, one acts with a surplus of guts that she overdose and act in such rashness and without any deliberation. The virtue of having courage is being able to act daringly enough but able to weigh up possible implications of such act that he or she proceeds with caution. For additional information, according to Aristotle, if you cannot be extremely angry, how can you ever challenge injustice the world? Also, one must live in accordance with certain virtues in order to attain happiness. Agree? He explains that happiness is the only complete end. That, since there is evidently more than one end, so clearly not all ends are complete ends, but the chief good is evidently something complete. He continues that happiness no one chooses for the sake other than itself. Aristotle suggests we can never find out what we truly stands for. We can never combat injustice in the world because it cannot be challenged without defying one crucial virtue, which is the good temperament. That's all, and thank you.